5. But the Bobcats have won 4 of the last 5 meetings, and this is a rivalry that goes all the way back to 1897, making it one of the most common matchups between current FCS schools all time. In fact, they're just one of 9 series between FCS teams that have met at least 120 times. You can expect plenty of action in this one. Both teams ranking top 7 in points per game in the FCS this season. Montana scored in 431 consecutive games. It's the longest streak in FCS history, second longest in Division I history. Glad the offenses are hot because the weather, not so much. Temperatures in the single digits. Good morning, Bozeman, Montana. Frosty, but faithful. The fine folks at Montana State University, always a good day to be a Bobcat. Lately, the days have been better than most. 9-1 is the win-loss record. Playing for a conference title are these Bobcats. In College Game Day's Kirk Herbstreit joining us on a -2, do I have that correct? -2 degree morning in Bozeman, Montana?
I think you have that right. How's everybody doing? Well, this is awesome. We came close to coming last year, and of course we're here now, and this is fantastic. This is big-time college football atmosphere. They are loving this and been waiting for this matchup, so it'll be a good day today here in Montana.
So normally we ask you what's the atmosphere. You sort of can see it and hear it behind you. In terms of an FCS environment, though, what does it mean to bring the bus, bring the crew in for a rivalry like this, Kirk?
It's incredible. I mean, I think, again, this is what makes College Game Day what we've really become over the last probably 5 to 7 years, is not always going to the big Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, Auburn. It's coming and celebrating games like this and rivalries like this and shedding light on it. You know, you and I have talked about that throughout this year. We've kind of gone to places like Boone, North Carolina, and now here we are in Montana. And, man, it's just an honor for us to be a small part of it and reflect all the passion and energy that this sport provides every single Saturday.
They are getting us hyped here in the studio. All right, so maybe they won't.
It's 70 and balmy here as far as they're concerned.
Now, all right, listen, other crowds, they bristle when we try to talk about other conferences. I do need to ask you about a couple other games. What do you think the folks are going to let us talk about Pac-12? Because we're
yeah. We'll see. We'll see how it'll go. Yeah.
We're getting brass tacks, but I got to ask you about the Trojan offense. Number 7 in the country, dangerous spot right now, going crosstown, taking on UCLA, spot in the Pac-12 title game on the line. What jumps out to you when you look at the film here on this offense for the Trojans?
It's Lincoln Riley, year 1 with a quarterback who he obviously knew, in Caleb Williams. I still feel like they're trying to be able to get into more of a rhythm. I think when you watch them, most of their big plays are when Caleb Williams is creating and buying time. And, you know, the offensive line, I think, you know, they're still trying to kind of work in sync with him and with the receivers. But his big play ability is what UCLA will have to contain today. His ability to work off schedule and off platform is what makes him unique. And, you know, I don't know about you. I love when USC and UCLA get together with those uniforms.
Yes.
To me, it's one of the great rivalries in the sport.
Yes.
And I'm fired up to be able to watch that one later today.
You're right. It really does. It's college football royalty when you see those on the screen. The nice weather helps. Now, listen, you're going to be taking the common direct flight from Bozeman to Columbia, South Carolina. You're on the call for the Tennessee game tonight. 5th-ranked Vols. Now, listen, Shane Beamer's crew, they'll turn you over. All right, Beamer Ball does travel. What do the Vols need to do to keep their playoff hopes alive?
By the way, you get in this. I mean, it is cold. What do the Vols and the Gamecocks, South Carolina, they are back home. And anytime they play in Columbia, there's always a chance. And remember, the last time Tennessee went on the road, it was obviously against the best team in the country, Georgia. But just the execution of their offense wasn't there. They were out of sync. And talking to their coaches last night, I think a lot of it had to do with them just adjusting to dealing with not just Georgia, but the crowd. And you think about when they've looked great, they've been at home. So I think they're trying to embrace the fact that they're away from Neyland. Let's show that we can keep this offense going on the road. And So you know how it'll be. You know, South Carolina, they just had a disappointing loss. They're by far worst loss of the year. You know how college football is. Last week they couldn't do much of anything in Gainesville. Now they come back home trying to shock the world, and they've Clemson next week. So there's a lot at stake, I think, for both these teams, not just Tennessee. It should be a great scene later tonight in Columbia.
When I was trying to break into the business, I wanted to work in Helena. I wanted to work in Billings and Great Falls and Butte. I got negged at all those jobs. And I would have covered a game like this, and I would have been happy to do it. Kirk, I know it's frosty. Thank you for braving the elements.
That's how you get respect.
We are running out of real estate in the regular season, so let's chop it up specifically about the SECs. We welcome in Tim Tebow from a frosty Columbia, South Carolina. Going to start with another SEC matchup, Tim. You just saw Stetson Bennett at the end of that little teaser there. Georgia on the road taking on Kentucky, and they've dominated them in the last 12 meetings, 12 straight wins against them. What can Will Levis do to try to disrupt that and maybe break a streak?
Well, I'll tell you what he needs to start with is an inspirational speech to his offensive line, because they ain't really blocked too many people all year. Through 10 games, they've given up 40 sacks. That's the most by any SEC team since 1999. And by the way, that's not a good thing, because you're going up against the best defense in the country and a defensive line that has gotten better throughout the entire season. And maybe Jalen Carter is the best defensive lineman in the country, so that's not a really good sign. So what does he have to do? He's got to get his team fired up, block somebody. And secondly, he's got to have great eye discipline. You got to be able to read it, react, and see what Georgia and Kirby Smart, this defense, is doing. Against ranked teams, he has 4 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. So he struggled a little bit sort of reading these defenses if they want to have any chance. Not just his offensive line has to step up, but he has to step up. He's got the talent. It is off the charts. But he has to have great eye discipline, read and react. And if he does that, maybe Kentucky can have a chance.
If any part of that inspirational speech includes the part, hey, we haven't gone up against a defense as good as this Georgia team, they're going to run. That's going to be a little bit scary for that offensive line. Hey, let's head to the West Coast now. We're talking about a big Pac-12 matchup, number 7 USC, number 16 UCLA. We have college football playoff implications potentially on the line here. What are you expecting from that matchup out west?
Well, they think you're behind me, think you're talking about a different USC, but the one out west, I tell you what, everyone's going to make it about the quarterbacks, and they should, because these are 2 quarterbacks that are off the charts. Very, very special. DTR and Caleb Williams, they're incredible quarterbacks. But I want to make it more about the running game, especially for UCLA. Listen, if you put it all on DTR, it's hard to match Caleb Williams score for score. But they have such a balanced approach, averaging 240 rushing yards every single game. Daniel Charbonnet, he's got to step up with the big game. Not only can you match them this way with running and passing, but you also can keep it out of Caleb Williams' hands, and I think that is going to be a massive key, because also they need to be able to run it when they get in the red zone. In their losses this year, they have gone down in the red zone, so that'll be a massive key as well.
I mean, Randy said it best. USC gets off the bus with 40 points already on the scoreboard, so expect plenty.
440 passing yards against Wake Forest. Where do you think May stands in the Heisman conversation?
Well, I think he stands right at the top, Randy. He's my favorite. If I had a chance to vote for a Heisman, I would vote Drake May. And there's 2 schools of thought when you talk about Drake May. Has he had that Heisman moment? Maybe not, because he hasn't had that big marquee game. The one time they did play Notre Dame, they lost. But if you actually turn the tape on, Randy, you're going to notice just an effortless play, an effortless understanding of his offense, and really hand talent. All these throws right here, you see him in a spot where he's not necessarily in phase with his footwork. Even this play right there, getting into his third receiver in his progression. And again, off his back foot, you got pressure in your face. He doesn't panic for a freshman quarterback. He just goes through his reads, throws an accurate ball to his receiver, and saves his offensive coordinator and play caller, because when you have those types of plays, you keep the chains moving.
Don't have to have an undefeated record to win the Heisman Trophy. As a matter of fact, I mean, our own colleague, Robert Griffin III, he won or lost a few games the year that he took home the trophy. We'll see what happens. 13th ranked Tar Heels, though, hosting Georgia Tech today, looking for their 7th win in a row. That's more EJ coming up on the Huddle as well, 11 a.m. Eastern. On 440 passing yards against Wake Forest. Where do you think May stands in the Heisman conversation?
Well, I think he stands right at the top, Randy. He's my favorite. If I had a chance to vote for a Heisman, I would vote Drake May. And there's 2 schools of thought when you talk about Drake May. Has he had that Heisman moment? Maybe not, because he hasn't had that big marquee game. The one time they did play Notre Dame, they lost. But if you actually turn the tape on, Randy, you're going to notice just an effortless play, an effortless understanding of his offense, and really hand talent. All these throws right here, you see him in a spot where he's not necessarily in phase with his footwork. Even this play right there, getting into his third receiver in his progression. And again, off his back foot, you got pressure in your face. He doesn't panic for a freshman quarterback. He just goes through his reads, throws an accurate ball to his receiver, and saves his offensive coordinator and play caller, because when you have those types of plays, you keep the chains moving.
Don't have to have an undefeated record to win the Heisman Trophy. As a matter of fact, I mean, our own colleague, Robert Griffin III, he won or lost a few games the year that he took home the trophy. We'll see what happens. 13th ranked Tar Heels, though, hosting Georgia Tech today, looking for their 7th win in a row. That's more EJ coming up on The Huddle as well, 11 a.m. Eastern